From FingerLakes1.com, I'm Josh Durso, and this is Inside the FLX. Our program today starts in December. That's when former Yates County Legislature Chairman Timothy Dennis said he would not seek another term leading that legislative body. Then Vice Chairman Doug Paddock stepped up and filled in for the absent Dennis in late 2017, and then earlier this year was named permanently to that post. Chairman Paddock is here to talk about a bunch of local issues. Chairman, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Josh, for the opportunity.
So first, I guess I just want to start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with politics, and the leadership post, obviously.
Well, I got involved in politics a little over 30 years ago when I ran for office the first time. My father was supervisor and county supervisor and county legislator, so I've kind of grown up in the family. It's in the family. Yes, absolutely. The leadership role, well, I worked full-time for Gould's Pumps for over 40 years. I had no opportunity to take on a greater leadership role. I chaired a number of committees and also some special projects along the way, but the full-time job kept me from taking on a higher leadership position. I retired a little over a year and a half ago and have a little more time. Dr. Dennis elected not to be chairman again, so and I've been vice chairman for several years, so I was able to take over at that point.
So I guess my main curiosity is, has your philosophy had to evolve at all coming from that vice role into the chairman role? Or has it pretty much maintained the same all along?
It's changed a bit. I have to communicate more and hopefully more effectively. Also, I don't necessarily always share my opinions until others have shared theirs. That's the biggest change, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are so I'm assuming sometime in December you started to realize that you were going to most likely pursue this. What were some of the goals when you were stepping up to the plate saying, okay, this is what I want to do, and these might be some of the things that I want to accomplish or continue working toward this year?
We're actually financially in good shape at the county, but we are in 2020 we make our last payment for the county office buildings, and the renovations that we did in the early part of the century. So there are some needs that have been put off in perhaps roads and other buildings that we need to address. So we are undertaking at this point a study for a capital plan to put together our expectations as to needs in the future, so that when that last payment is made, we either can determine we need to continue funding capital projects at that rate, we have to increase the funding, or perhaps we can reduce the funding that we put towards capital projects at that point. Anyway, we're looking forward 5 years. We're looking forward at least 5 years with a capital plan. So.
How important is the planning aspect of keeping the financial condition healthy of any large municipality like a county entity?
What the constituents don't like are big changes in their tax bills. No one likes a big jump in a payment of any kind that they have to make. So it's very important to build a fund balance so that when things go the wrong way and expenditures have to increase, there's some type of balance for it. We have in fact set up what we've called a budget stabilization fund, so that we can keep the tax rate close to the same without large increases, especially since the state has chosen to help us with a tax cap, so that people can plan better for what they have to pay, and so that we can plan better for our income.
Now, I'm just very curious because you guys have a pretty large, you have some significant highway fund money coming up. I believe is like $1.6 million. Walk us through what some of the items that are going to be addressed with those monies in the coming year?
It will be primarily in rebuilding and resurfacing roads. We've got 11.3 miles of road resurfacing in the budget this year at various locations that Dave Hartman has planned out. Dave also plans ahead for the following year and does prep work, culvert replacement, ditching, things of that sort. So he has a good capital plan also in place. We, for some years, because of the budget situation, had to reduce the number of miles that we paved down to 6 and 7 miles per year. Also, the cost of asphalt was very high at that time. So budgetarily, we couldn't cover that much. We're now back in the 11 and 12 mile per year range, which gives it about a 15-year life, which is not unreasonable for roads in this area. When you start getting to 20 and 30 years, that's a little bit unreasonable for considering the weather that we have.
How much of a challenge is that? I'm always curious, talking to elected officials, that learning curve that seems to exist between what people think it costs to run a municipality versus what it actually costs, because it is very expensive to do even just seemingly simple projects. How difficult is that to convey to constituents so they aren't frustrated all the time?
Well, again, it comes down to communication.
Right.
We do, in Yates County, we do a lot of the prep work ourselves for road rebuilding, for example. As I said, Dave replaces culverts and so on with our own crew, and we pay them significantly less than we would if we had to contract that out.
Right. Because
of prevailing wage requirements in the state of New York. We do contract out for some of the more things that require more specialized equipment, such as milling the pavement off and the paving portion itself, but a lot of the prep work is done in-house, but it's still expensive.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Obviously, you come from a family who's been involved in politics for a long time. Curious about your thoughts on just sort of the change that's happened in politics over the last several decades. It seems we're obviously in a more polarized time, but beyond that, it also seems to be a little more difficult now to get things done than it might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like it's just a matter of execution and people need to just get on it?
Well, whenever a project is proposed, there are always at least two sides to an issue. Mm-hmm. And there are always people opposed to what others think to be our progress. I can think back to the airport that we built in Yates County. There was a lot of opposition to that. Initially, there were fears that the airport would add to the tax cost of the property tax. And it's proven over the last over 25 years that it doesn't require a contribution from the property tax. It's been self-sustaining. So it's difficult to get things done. I can also think back to the building project where we held public meetings to explain what the project was going to be. It was a very extensive project for Yates County, just under $30 million. And we held public meetings to explain to people what would occur. And the hue and cry actually occurred when dirt started to be moved, buildings started to be torn down, and new buildings and footprints were put in place. And then it was, why are you building a Taj Mahal? But we'd attempted to communicate that ahead of time. Is it harder to get things done now? To some degree, but if you go through all the proper steps and assess the seeker process and all those things that you have to do, you can still get it done. It just takes a long time in New York.
So, well, we'll touch more on that on the New York aspect of it in a few minutes. But I also want to jump in and just get your take on, obviously the legislature passed a resolution opposing the circular energy incinerator that would be in Romulus, obviously in Seneca County. Walk us through what that decision was like and whether there was any, I don't want to say caution, but just concern about getting involved in something that is outside the bounds of typical, it's in our county, it's here, as opposed to something that's 20, 30 miles away?
Well, one has to assess that certainly, and it's situational. We wouldn't do it on everything. But we also, at the county level, passed a resolution in opposition to the gas storage facility in Reading. Typically, we try to assess things that occur in Yates County, and we don't especially appreciate assistance from outside our county, especially some folks that are opposed to what we consider progress. However, the Romulus situation could affect Seneca Lake, and Seneca Lake borders on a number of counties.
Right.
And if the wind happens to be out of the east, that's fairly unusual, but if it does happen to be out of the east, anything coming out of the smokestack would end up in Yates County. So I think those were issues that were evaluated by the legislature when they passed the resolution.
What does it show you with this, the solidarity that seems to exist across the board? You got state legislators, assemblymen, women, everyone, the local bodies, municipals, schools, you name it. They all seem to be aligned against this. What do you think that solidarity says about the region and also, obviously, about this project?
Well, I think the people that live here because they like the region and they don't want something that is perceived to be a very negative addition to occur. The same type of opposition occurred over 30 years ago with the Finger Lakes Solid Waste Authority, who was proposing an incinerator in Ontario County that ultimately did not proceed. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's new that people are opposed to incinerators. I just think it's new that a company is proposing to do that at the location they are.
So let's talk about economic development. Obviously, a lot of people are very happy with the things not only that are happening in Yates County, but across the Finger Lakes as a whole. What do you see as far as economic development that really gets you excited, that really makes you say, wow, we have come a long way and we are really going the right direction?
I attended the Finger Lakes Economic Development Center board meeting yesterday, and driving around the region, there are a lot of things in Yates County that are going on. There are proposals for a new restaurant. They're building a truss manufacturing facility in Benton, a new tractor supply south of Penn Yan, and wineries and breweries are popping up all over the place. My favorite brewery is 1.7 miles from home. Not that I've measured it, but I think it's great that it's primarily focused on home-based businesses, if you will, mm-hmm. small businesses. It would be great to see a larger manufacturing organization come into the region, but by having a lot of smaller based businesses, if the economy changes and the big business is badly affected, it doesn't affect nearly as many people.
So I guess I want to talk about that a little more because obviously you're a retired Goulds guy. Mm-hmm. So you know firsthand what that sort of up and down can do, and especially if it's a very, very large company. What do you say to those folks who come, or the typical comeback is, but we don't have any jobs. There aren't any jobs. We need the manufacturing jobs. We need it seems, the return to what was maybe 25, 30, 40 years ago as opposed to what is doable now. How do you sort of navigate that really tough debate?
Well, that's, as you say, that's a tough debate.
Yeah.
At the present time, again, at the same meeting yesterday, Steve Griffin reinforced that we need housing, we need things for people to do. It would be great to have a large manufacturing organization come in, but I don't see that happening right away.
And a lot of folks think that that's largely due to state implications, various state forces that are ultimately making New York State a less viable place to do business. So jumping right off of that, what do you think would be best for the Yates County taxpayer if New York State were going to let up the reins on a couple items, or maybe just one if that's all it would take, what do you think some of the fixes would be or could be?
Thank you for that, Josh. That's an easy answer. If the state of New York would take over the cost of Medicaid, that would help the property taxpayers considerably. I'm sure the taxpayers, the constituents, are tired of hearing about state mandates, but of the property tax in Yates County, over 60% is caused by state mandates. If the state would take over the cost of Medicaid, property taxes could go down in Yates County about 25%. It's a little over $4 million that we appropriate for Medicare. It's our largest program. You'll hear this from all other counties, I'm sure. And our total property tax levies are in the $16 million range. So that would reduce our property taxes considerably. Just that one thing that the New York State could do for the counties.
Does that tough tax climate, from the state's perspective, does that make what these folks who are working in economic development offices, what they're accomplishing, even more impressive?
Yeah, I mean it does. New York, of course, has a great, at least this region is great to live in, but New York itself is not all that easy to do business with. It's not easy to work with. They're very challenging. Another thing they could do is take over the cost of indigent legal services. Like most other states do that. They don't share the cost with their counties. New York State essentially mandates what will be done, and they're even getting into more of the regulation. They promise to pay for some of it, but some of us have our doubts.
You're hopeful that they will.
Yes.
So let's talk about probably what I would view as the most exciting thing happening in Yates County, and that's broadband access. Where does that effort stand right now, and where is it going over the next 6 months to a year?
We've, as you're well aware, we put in a dark fiber ring so that fibers are available, a backbone is available for providers to attach to in order to provide broadband to the home. We actually will be signing a lease agreement with a company called RuralNet, who is setting up a pilot program to bring wireless broadband to a small area in the county. As I said, it's a pilot program. It will be focusing on one customer. If that works, it will expand from there. And quite honestly, wireless broadband is probably what's going to be needed to get broadband to the home in a lot of Yates County, partly because of topography and partly because of population density. It's expensive to run a fiber when you've only got 2 or 3 people per mile.
But, and this is what I always like to sort of remind people, how important is the broadband access? How important is internet access, solid, strong internet access in 2018, not just for the average household, but for getting those businesses to say, hey, I want to do business in Yates County?
It's like electricity, water, sewer. It's now another needed utility that has to be reliable and has to be state of the art, or you lose out when entities are comparing where to locate. If you have a good supply of water, if you have reliable electricity, if you have sewer, if you have telephone and broadband, that's an expectation. And anybody that doesn't have that is probably immediately going to be eliminated from the possibility of having a business located there.
Now, I want to get the crystal ball out here. What are you thinking in terms of what does Yates County look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I just want to kind of walk through. Obviously, you guys have a lot of different things going on, a lot of different efforts that are all seeming to move in the right direction. Could be the beginning of a really strong period for Yates County as a whole, right?
It certainly could be. As I said, we're in good financial shape. That should help stabilize our tax base, our taxes. as long as people still, the economy is doing well and people still have disposable income, the lake properties will still continue to appreciate in value, and the recreation will remain or increase. I don't think you'll see humongous projects. You may see some building projects in 5 and 10 years. Because some of our facilities are becoming outdated and aren't operating well. But I don't think you'll see huge projects. I don't think you'll see an incinerator trying to move in.
So last question before we get you out of here and on your way. Obviously, we really appreciate you coming in. Looking forward throughout the entire Finger Lakes, seems to be a lot more unity, a lot more communication between counties, between towns, villages, whatever the case may be, cities. Do you see that communication moving forward, and do you see the sort of shared services push that is obviously has been happening for the last 10, 15 years for these small municipalities? Do you see that continuing as well, where more of these communities are saying, hey, let's partner up and figure out how we can do this more efficiently and better?
Yeah. In Yates County, there's always been some partnership. For example, the fire departments all have, the county fire coordinator has a list of equipment that they have, and we don't have the same capabilities in each fire department. That, for example, there's a rope rescue or a cavern or a rope rescue out of Dundee. There's a dive team out of Branchport. It's not that every entity has a dive team or a rope rescue or things like that. So there's always been cooperation in Yates County and among the municipalities. The county has equipment that they loan out to the towns. Multiple towns have gotten together to buy large pieces of equipment so that not one town is tagged for the total amount. So I think the cooperation, the shared services that is being touted throughout the state has always been occurring in Yates County. It just might be a little more to the forefront now than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate
and I think that has to continue.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming in today. Best of luck throughout the rest of this legislative year, and good luck with everything you got going on.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Josh. Thank you.
That is going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Chairman Paddock, our listeners, and of course, FingerLakes1.com for making this podcast possible. You can catch Inside the FLX on Saturdays during the 10 o'clock hour on WDWN 89.1 FM in Auburn or 97.7 FM in Fulton. The program also airs on Sundays and Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on Spectrum, channel 1304, and is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. Stay informed, Finger Lakes, and we will catch you next time.